I'm sure you've heard about families who ship their kid off to some boarding school where the kid leads a miserable and lonely existence. I shipped myself off to boarding school where I led a miserable and lonely existence. I went to the Choate School in Wallingford, Connecticut. President John F. Kennedy had gone there, Adlai Stevenson, all kinds of famous people. I served a 3-year sentence there, and I tell you what I remember. That experience at that school was the loneliest time of my life. I can still remember once in a while they'd give us a weekend off and I'd go visit my grandfather in New York City. And I can still remember those Sunday night train rides back into town and the darkness and the sense of despair that just came over me. I think that I cried every time I went back to that place. I had my first experience with politics at Choate. The way they elected people to the student government was they just pass out a sheet of paper with the names of everybody in the class, and you just voted for the most popular person, the captain of the football team or captain of the basketball team, that kind of thing. It was just a popularity contest. Now, I reasoned that since I didn't have a single friend in that school, that this system would not work in my favor. So I did something that nobody had ever done. I decided to campaign for the office. And I printed up hundreds of flyers, and I started passing out these flyers in the lunchroom, on the bulletin boards, in the mail room, everywhere. And I can still remember when I had put it in every mailbox, and I was kind of in the mailroom hiding behind a pillar, and I saw the first guy that came in and pulled his form out of the mailbox. And I remember the guy pulled it out, and I'm kind of hiding, and he looks at it and he goes, "Heimlich, I know that jerk." Come to think, it kind of prepared me for my later service on Cincinnati City Council. Do you know what's interesting? After I did that, everybody else started campaigning. Other people started campaigning, and they'd print up their list of issues and their platform, and they were passing it out. And even though I didn't win that election, I learned something. I had changed the system of elections forever at Choate, and I realized that if I applied myself, I could make a difference. All the loneliness and being without friends and sadness I had at that school, I did for one reason, because I wanted to get into Stanford University. That's what I wanted more than anything. And I remember a spring day, my senior year, I'm walking on the campus, and some guy walked by and he goes, "You know, the Stanford letters are in." I'm telling you, my hands started getting sweaty, my stomach got tight, and I started walking slowly over to the post office because everything that I had worked for had come down to this. And I remember walking into that mailroom and opening up that mail slot, and I saw this thick letter from Stanford University. At that time, that was the happiest moment of my life. I got to Stanford. Everything I had done at that point didn't mean anything. Now I was focused on one thing, getting into a top 10 law school. And I did whatever it took. I looked for easy courses that I could get quick A's in. I was in a fraternity at Stanford. It was called Phi Kappa Psi. But we didn't follow the regular fraternity rituals that other fraternities did. We had girls in there, for one thing. And I found out that every year the national office of Phi Psi offered an award, but presented an award to that member in each chapter that most reflected the qualities of leadership, citizenship, and scholarship. Now, our chapter didn't even bother with that award, but I found out about it. So I went up to the manager of the fraternity and I said, "Look, could you do me a favor? I'm applying for law school next year. Could you give me the Solony Summerfield Award?" Well, they gave it to me. But it came with a $500 prize. They kept that and threw a party. I discovered another goal when I was at Choate: popularity. For me, it wasn't enough just to be at all the wild parties. I had to be the guy that threw the wildest and the best parties. And I got into some pretty self-destructive behaviors there just because I wanted to fit in and I wanted to be liked. I also kind of started focusing on girls there. For most people, dating was a form of socializing. For me, it was competition. And for me, anytime I had a good-looking girl with me, it was like a status symbol. It was like another A on my transcript. Something else I remember about my time at Stanford, my best friend, his name was John Blanchard. John was on the football team. He had a lot of girlfriends. I really envied him. And there's something about him that I remember. There was something he had that was different from me. I was always tense and worried and driven, and he always had this peace about him, this calm. I remember that. There was something else about John that was different. He was different from most of the people at that school. He actually was interested in God. Now, you have to understand, this was the time of the anti-war movement. Nobody had any regard for authority of any kind. It wasn't fashionable at that time to have an interest in God or Jesus. Well, I got into University of Virginia, top 10 law school. And as I was approaching my last year at the University of Virginia, I had everything in life you could want. Great family, great education. I was about to embark on the career that I'd always wanted. But you know what? I felt empty. I just, at times, despaired for life. I didn't feel like life was worth living. And I started thinking about this emptiness I had inside. And I thought about my friend John back at Stanford, who seemed to have that peace, and some other people I knew that had a peace that I didn't have. And I started asking myself, what did they have that I don't have? And I realized that each of those people had something in common. They were each interested in God. Now, this made me very uncomfortable. For one thing, I had developed a hard-won reputation as a partier, and I didn't want to give that up by talking about God or Jesus or something like that. But also, I'm Jewish. I mean, Jewish people don't talk about Jesus and stuff like that. What would my family think? So one day at law school, I decided to have dinner with this guy named Bob Meek. Bob was known as one of the religious guys at University of Virginia Law School. I went out to dinner with him, and I said, hey, look, could you tell me about this thing, this God thing you're into? And he said, when he was in high school, he said he had some drug problems, and that he said he accepted Christ as his Savior, and he was able to overcome those drug problems. And at that point, I didn't really want to deal with this. I wanted just to walk away from it. But I felt this tugging, like I was being tugged in this direction. And he gave me some books about God and the Bible. And normally at law school, I didn't have time to read anything except law books. But I just devoured these books.